fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back. This is going to be a fun one. Before I introduce the guest, I want to tell a funny story. So you may or may not know Andy Mill. I'm guessing most of you do. And this guy, at least in my opinion, he is like 100% or maybe 130% in everything he does. I've watched him on TV. I've obviously heard many crazy stories about downhill skiing with broken bones and all this stuff. And I sent him a message via Instagram, and I got a message pretty quickly back from his son Nicky, and he's like, "Hey, what's your number? We'll contact you." And he calls me, and I'm chatting with him. First time I've ever talked to Andy, and right off the bat, he's like, "All right, you ready to do this?" And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of at Publix right now. Maybe we can wait." He's like, "Well, how about tonight or an hour?" And I was like, "I love it." I mean, I literally loved it. I came home and told my wife, I was like, "Man, this guy, he is a man of action. He just gets it. He does it. He's not, let's wait 2 more weeks and schedule something out a year from now." I love it. So I have a feeling, Andy, first of all, welcome to the show, that's kind of how you do everything is you get something and you're like, let's just do it. I'll learn as fast as I can. Let's grip it and rip it.
You're sweet. And thank you for the kind words with the introduction. No, I've been a very fortunate human being. I'm 67 years old, and every day it's like, what are we going to go do? We got to go catch or kill something, I'm a firm believer in living as fully as we can. You never know when that last step is going to be taken, but I've been very fortunate growing up on top of a mountain here in Aspen, and then getting, my teeth cut with the saltwater stuff about 35, almost 40 years ago in the Keys. So between those two lifestyles, I am just as fortunate as I could possibly dream of being.
Well, you create a lot of your own luck, obviously, and we've had some podcasts in the past where we talk about that, about just the taking action and just getting out in the water or the slopes or out there hunting if you're in Aspen or Wyoming, wherever you might be at the time, and just doing it. And one thing I thought was interesting, I listened to your podcast with our mutual friend April Voki, and you had said something to the fact of that you had maybe spent as much as $1 million on fishing guides, and that was a big reason you got so good so fast, and it really was kind of a group effort to do all that. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk all about your new podcast too, because that thing is blowing up. And one video you did recently on the PSA for all anglers and hunters, I thought that was pretty timely. Do you mind sharing just what that message was real quick?
No, I don't mind at all. And just to remind everybody, it's a Millhouse podcast, and it's a brainchild of my son, Nicky's. He's been asking for about 5 years now, "Dad, we got to do a podcast." And, I've been pretty busy for a long time. And the last thing I want to do is get involved with something that's going to be really consuming. Unless it's something I really want to do. And then I thought, well, right now for my son, it's hard to get a job. And so I said, why not? So we bought some video cameras, so our podcast is all videoed.
Yep.
And so you get to see the inflections, you get to see the emotions of our guests. And it's really turned out to be really something that is surprisingly well received. It's got some great traction. And as far as the PSA is concerned, I've always been, having fished with professional guides for 30 some years. And as you mentioned, I think I've spent probably over $1 million in guides, and that's, I'm very fortunate to have had, some success in my life and have the money. And when I got into tarpon fishing, I was all in. It's like, oh my God, it was a life changer. I mean, shortly thereafter, I quit all my ski-related activities. I started hosting a fishing show called Sportsman's Journal. We did 81 shows from around the world.
Wow.
And I became a fisherman. When I saw a tarpon bite my fly, I became a changed person. And from that point on, I started fishing 40 to 60 days a year for tarpon. Then after 7 years of being mentored by Harry Spear, I got into the tournament scene, and I started fishing tournaments. And interestingly, I was probably more adamant and more connected and more, what's the word I'm thinking of? Possessed, if you will, to win and become the best tarpon fisherman in the world than I was as an Olympic skier. And I say that because when I was on the Olympic team, I was a little bit too young to understand the magnitude of what I was doing. And I was not smart enough to get it on my own. I needed some mentors. I needed some coaching. I was going too fast where I shouldn't be going fast, or trying to push that limit. I got hurt a lot. But when I became a fisherman, I was all in, and I could not get enough of it. And so, talking about spending $1 million on guides, I didn't care what it cost or how much time it took. I wanted. I was possessed. I was addicted, and I was in over my head. And but that's the only way you get good at stuff. And so back then, when I couldn't fish for some reason, I remember one time I had my ex-wife and I had a Nordic Track commercial we were going to shoot, and I called Harry Spear. I said, "Hey, Harry," and I was far enough out that I thought that he could rebook these days that I had. And I said, "Hey, Harry, I'm not going to be able to fish in 6 weeks, And he said, "Well, what do you got going on?" I said, "Well, I've got some professional stuff I've got to take care of." I said, "You can rebook, right?" He said, "No, I don't want to rebook." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, look, I fish with the people I want to fish with. I don't want to fish with just a random person. So you're canceling me for a monetary reason. Why don't you send me the money that you're supposed to send me?" So he put the pressure on me. It was driving me crazy. Here's one of the best fishermen in the world. It's like, how can you not rebook with even guides, other anglers that you know? And I said, "I tell you what, Harry, I'll send you the money, but you got to do me a favor. I'll send you it was like 5 days, at the time I was spending $600 a day. So I'll send you $3,000, but do me a favor. You tie me $3,000 worth of tarpon flies." Right? I didn't want to just give him a bunch of money without having somebody, give me something in return. So anyway, he sent me like maybe 2 dozen flies, and we were good. So, but I think what it is that from the old school guys who have fished a long time, it's not everybody. I mean, a lot of the very top professionals have been fishing for so long that they only want to fish their friends. They don't want to fish people that are good fishermen and that they like. And I get that. I don't want a random person on my boat that I don't know and I don't like, unless it's a charity thing. But on a daily basis, I understand that these guys have worked for so long, and the anglers that they have, they want that person on their boat. So I started learning at that point why professional guides don't want to have, if you've been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, they don't want to just have a random person show up. When you're cutting your teeth, guides need anglers. They don't have that selected group of guys that have earned their way onto that boat, like Steve Huff. You cannot pay to get on Steve Huff's boat, because he only wants the people that he knows on his boat. Right. I get that. So now when I can't fish, like with Dustin Huff, Steve's son, I fished with him for 10 years. And the last 3 years we fished, it was like in March, it was 60 degrees and blowing 30. We were not going to even find a tarpon, let alone catch one. So I would just send him the full check, and I'd go to Aspen, and I'd come out here and go spring skiing, for that week. But now it's different. The PSA is such that all of our guides in the freshwater and saltwater world right now, spring and summer, make make all their really comfort money to survive over the course of the winter right now.
Yep.
And with the virus out right now, it's like nobody can travel. So if you cancel, that guide can't rebook. So it's like, come on, man. We have to do the right thing. And if you have the financial stability, which most people have, if you're going to go saltwater fly fishing, because the cost is $800 to $1,000 a day. Most of these guys have a fair amount of money. So my statement was, hey guys, let's just pay for that trip anyway. And if you're a little bit tight, as we all are now, because I don't care who you are, you've been hit by the financial market.
Yep.
You've been hit by a lifestyle. So if you can't really pay the full pop, pay 50%. Just send your guide some money. You know, we have to help our fellow friends and our fellow brothers, because guides are not just guides. They are our friends. They are an extended family member. I mean, I tell you, in my life, a major percentage of my closest friends are fishing guides, and I really consider them family. And if you're an angler out there in the world, whether you're going to be traveling far or close or whatever, just have the perspective like, hey, I got to help this guy, because this guy's got probably a family and a wife and some kids, and they have food to put on the table. We need to help these fellow guides. And I think it's gotten a lot of traction, and I think a lot of people are starting to understand as to not only with the coronavirus taking place, but it's just the right thing to do. If that guide can't rebook, if you cancel in a short period of time, just pay that guide. You know,
I love it.
Karma is a good thing. We want to have karma in our back pocket on a daily basis.
I love it. And I love the idea too about, you know, kind of getting something in return. You know, obviously if you can afford it and don't need anything at all, awesome. But if these guides are great at tying flies or doing something else unique, and for instance, like we're paying 3 guides as I'm recording this, and hopefully a little bit more over time here, to give us video content, guys that we know that have some video cameras and are good in front of a camera, and we're paying them right now during this tough time to give us content, you know, because we're kind of a media company, if you will. And they're out in the water, they have the boat, they have the gear, they know how to catch fish, and it's a win-win for everyone, and we're able to help subsidize some of their losses and pay for some of the stuff that they've been missing out on. So I love that. I want to pivot a little bit too, in terms of like when you hired these people. I mean, it sounds like you treated it just like you would a professional sport or an Olympic sport or anything, that you want to become the very best in the world, which it sounds like you did. You used the word possessed. You're like, I'm going to hire the best. You treated it the same way. You get a good coach, you get a good team, you get a good network, which it sounds like you did all that stuff. What did you learn? Like, and why did you keep spending money? I'm curious. Like, was there ever a point where you're like, you know what, I don't need to learn anymore? Or is it like Tiger Woods, where you always have a coach and you're always constantly learning something?
Well, the only reason I would hire a guide right now is because that guide is a great friend.
Got it.
I love Doug Kilpatrick. I love Dustin Huff. I love Joe Rodriguez. I won tournaments with 7 different guides. They are really an extended family member of mine. Paul Tahara. These guys play golf, so in the winter we all come up and we play. You know, the course that I'm a member of up in Boca. But I'm not going to learn anything from them from a fishing point of view. But what I do get from them, you know, I have my own boat and I fish with my son. So I've got a house in the Keys now starting May 1st, and hopefully we can get down and fish. But for those 6 weeks, I fish with my son only. We pole each other. What I get from a professional guide is I know I can catch the fish that I see, but I might not be able to find that fish. And the great relationship or assessment I have with good and great fishermen is a great fisherman can catch a fish that doesn't want to be caught. And that's the difference between winning tournaments and getting fourth. And a great guide is the guide that can find the fish that doesn't want to be found. And so if I hire a guide, there is no way I can go into a tournament without knowing I've got the best guide in the game. You're going to finish. It's a team thing. Yep. And that guide, if he wants to win the Gold Cup, the biggest fly tournament in the world, if that great guide has an average angler, well, you're going to be handicapped. And that's why when I go into a tournament, or when I used to fish tournaments, I used to be usually not afraid of a good angler. I was afraid of a great guide, because that great guide might be able to find that angler more fish. And if he has more fish to throw to, he's going to end up catching more fish. I was never too afraid of a great angler because I knew, for the most part, I was probably better than that person. You know, I don't want to sound too cocky, but I was really cocky and I could catch the hell out of tarpon. I was afraid of nobody because before the first tarpon tournament, I had already caught maybe 50 tarpon. And I knew, and people used to say, "Why do you tell everybody your secrets?" I said, "Well, they're not going to beat me. I'll tell them exactly what hook to use and what fly to throw, but they're not going to beat me. Nobody fishes more than me." But what I was always concerned with was the great guide.
Mm. So who did you use when you won like 5 out of 6 or some crazy amount of those cups?
Yeah, we won 5 out of 6 gold cups. I was fishing with Timmy Hoover, and we fished a lot together. We fished the Lower Keys, and I knew in the Lower Keys, a lot of times we could find maybe not nearly as many fish, but I could catch those fish. So that's sometimes, too, what makes a great guide good. He can find a fish that can be caught. There are a lot of guys that might take people or anglers to areas that might have really, really clear, calm water with really big fish. That's like, the Chamber of Commerce fish. You take them there to show and tell, and the guide will think in his heart, "I showed him some fish, he just couldn't catch them. It's all his fault." But there's a difference that's played out with a great guide. You might be able to find fish in a little off-color water, fish that might feed a little bit better, bite that bug a little bit better, and those are the fish that you need to be able to catch in a tournament. And it was interesting, like, I'll just make this brief, but a prime example is one of the Gold Cups. It was like a Wednesday, and we'd caught a real big fish on that Monday. I think we caught like a 155 and another couple of fish on Tuesday, and on Wednesday it was noon. We hadn't even seen a fish, and we were fishing Long Key near Isla Morada. And Timmy says, "Wind it up. Let's go. We're going to take a run." I said, "Where are we headed?" He said, "We're going to go to the Lower Keys down by Key West." I said, "Timmy, it's 12:30. By the time we get there, we're only going to have an hour and a half to fish. Then we got to head home, but we got to be back by 5. He said, "Well, there's nothing here. There's a few fish. There's a few fish down there. I know we can catch 1 or 2. So we ran all the way down to the Lower Keys. We had an hour and a half. We caught a 132 and a 117.
Wow.
But those were fish that were, we only saw 3 fish, but these fish were in a little bit off-color water, and these were catchable fish. So anyway, we'll get back, so getting back to guides and hiring guides, if you're new to the game, it's going to be hard to get the best guide. So what happens is if you finally can get into fish with a good guide, it might be the off season, like when the timing is not perfect.
Yep.
At least you're getting into the game. And so here's a good thing now, that if you pay that guide full amount, even though you can't fish, that guide's going to remember this, and you might have a better slot next year. Instead of fishing tarpon in February, he might give you a slot in March and April, closing in on that perfect May date. And eventually, over time, you pay, you tip well, you treat him as a close friend. Pretty soon, you're going to get the good time, the best time to go catch those fish. And that's how it's all played out. It's all give and take. And like I said, not only are we trying to get a better time to fish for tarpon or bonefish or whatever next year, what we're doing right now, we're trying to help keep these guys alive.
Yeah, and to your point, they become friends and family, and on that, I think it's so cool how involved Nikki is. Talk about that. How did that come into play? I know you got a few kids, I believe. How did that relationship happen? It seems like you guys are hunting and fishing all the time. How cool is that too? It's something. I've got a 3-year-old son. I hope and pray that he's into the outdoors as much as I do. Talk about that real quick.
Well, the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Yeah. Chrissy and I have got 3 boys, and they were all around. I always had them fishing and playing with the mullet, and we'd go fishing, and we'd ride dirt bikes, and they all raced motorcycles. And Nikki and I got into elk hunting, but Nikki was always the one that wanted to go fishing. He was always riding on my shoulders, when I was going to the tournaments in the Keys. We were just staying at the Chica, and he always wanted to come over and be around, the juice, if you will. You walk into an angler's meeting, he wanted to see all the guides and all the anglers, and he wanted to hear the fish talk. And Nicky just loved going fishing, and he gravitated to hunting and fishing. Everything I've done, he's been right next to me. When he was like probably 4 years old, I'd be out in the garage working on a motorcycle, and he'd grab a crescent wrench and just start banging it against the spokes on the wheel, thinking that he was working on the motorcycle. Whatever I did, he was in on it. And then I started teaching him, at an early young age. He was always on the boat, even when he was really little. But he caught his first tarpon when he was like 11 years old.
That's awesome.
And he was oh my God, he's unbelievable. I put him up against anybody in the world as far as tarpon fishing goes. And he fishes the golden fly. He's finished second in the golden fly and third in the holly. And he's a great fisherman. But more than that, he's my best friend. I mean, I'm with him every day. And in the fall, it's just unbelievable to push my boat and say, Nicky, he's coming about 80 feet at 10 o'clock. Or he'll tell me, Dad, you see him. He sees fish way before I do now. And to be able to catch these fish, and he pulls me and I catch fish, and then we go into the woods and I call in a bull elk, which he killed 2 years ago. It's just unbelievable. I'm the most fortunate person in the world in the fact that not only have I been able to do a lot of cool things, but I've got a son like I have that's my best friend.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you guys, it seems like you're having fun. I haven't watched every one of the episodes, but it's now on my list since we're all kind of inside a lot more than before. You guys are having a blast with the podcast, with the Millhouse podcast, two of you.
Yeah, you know what? The storytelling is unbelievable. When Flip Pallet, Steve Huff, Tom Evans, Chico Fernandez, Stu App, you cannot find greater names in the game than these guys. In the stories that they tell, and Chico Fernandez growing up in Cuba, and how he built and made his own, bike and flying kites and fishing and gravitating. When Castro came and everybody had to leave, and they took the boat to Key West and then gravitated to Miami, and then he and Norman Duncan and Flip Pallet became, the three amigos. And the stories told are just so riveting. Yeah. Steve Huff talking about, the innovation of permit flies to catch those fish west of Key West. He and Del Brown, and what they learned over all those years. And it's just so compelling. And, when they were catching world record tarpon, and Steve talks about driving a steel gap into the back of a fish and getting ripped out of a boat, and it's just, and Flip Pallet, the way he talks about Lefty Cray. And it's just, I'm so glad Nicky came up with this idea, because a lot of these stories are going to go away unless they're recorded and told. Yep. And the book I wrote, A Passion for Tarpon, was not only my methodology about how to successfully catch fish and the biology of the fish and the history of catching fish with flies, but the stories of these guys, how they innovated the sport, what kind of bad tackle they had, and the fish that they killed and the fish that got away. And Stu App talks about a fish that he caught, probably a 230-pound tarpon on 12-pound test, and they gaffed it twice, and Ralph Delp gets ripped out of the boat twice, and Stu runs them over with the boat, and they lose the fish. These are stories of the war that everybody waged, in the innovation and the evolution of the sport. And I feel sorry for the people who don't know about who our pioneers are and were. And that, to me, is as captivating as understanding where we are today. And it's interesting because, they talk about, a lot of old timers really hate the world that we see now, as far as the pollution and lack of good water, and the evolution of poor water out of Lake Okeechobee and the sugar industry. And, I look at my house. I'm standing at my house right now, and I live on top of a mountain. I'm looking at a 14,000-foot mountain. I look over at Aspen, and how this town has evolved. I moved here in 1960 when my family moved here. I was a young man, and the evolution of Aspen, and a lot of people don't like it, but it's, you know what? It's awesome. These are the good old days. If you're talking about tarpon fishing in the Lower Keys and or skiing in Aspen, the flies and the designs and the hooks and the rods and the reels, we might not see as many fish, but we can still get them. And the sport is so compelling that you have to look past the bad stuff. You have to look past some of the issues and enjoy that sunrise. And, don't look at the boat or the 3 boats that are around you. Just look at the fish and the turtles and the seagrass. And, I'm looking at a storm rolling right now. It's like, these are the good old days. I don't care where you are or what you're doing. Just think about the goodness of it all.
I love that, man. And you had a heck of a year last year, right, on the tarpon? Didn't you have a great?
Yeah, God, we had a great year, and I think, a lot of fishing is based on weather. We had great weather last year. I mean, usually it takes, right now, the Keys have been going off for the last 3 weeks because the weather is so good. All my buddies are just mohawking the tarpon right now. And it's good because nobody can get down there, and the only people that are fishing are guides fishing with guides because anglers can't get down there. But, yeah, we had a great year. I got out. Usually I don't find really good fishing until the 2nd or the 3rd week in May, when they start traveling down to beaches. But I got out there May 1st. I got out on the edge where I was fishing, and I looked up, and here they came. And they swam until June 10th. It was really good.
And you guys caught a ton of them.
We got it good. We hooked 28 one day and caught 14.
I'd say it's a pretty banner day.
Yeah, it was good.
So what?
And these are all 60 to I would say you don't catch 120-pound fish that often, but we caught one that was 150 to 160 last year. That was laid up in crystal clear water.
Man.
That was probably the greatest fish I've seen caught, in a long time. And it was awesome because it was my son. I said, Nicky, we got to go over to the spot. I said, there was a lot of boats on the water. We just caught a fish, and we're looking, to move because we went pulling down through this little basin. It was a pulling spot, not a stakeout spot. And all the stakeout spots were taken. I said, well, let's go over to this spot, another basin where you pull looking for fish. And I hadn't fished there in 15 years. And Nicky said, yeah, let's go over there. So I get him in there. We start pulling. I told him, I said, they usually hang out over on this wall 15 years ago. So I went over there. I started pulling, and sure enough, 5 minutes later, here comes a real big fat fish. And Nicky makes the cast, and the fish ducks the fly. And I said, yeah, that's what they do in here. And we pulled down another 100 yards, and there were 3 big fat fish laying right on the bottom, big black logs. And I said, just give it a real long lead. And we use 15-foot leaders and all clear fly line. And I said, just let it marinate, meaning just let it work, marinate, let the current take the fly, let the fly get down, let the fly get in front of his face, let the current get the fly there. Don't cast the fish. And so he made like a 30-foot lead and let it marinate. And I lost the fly. I couldn't see the fly line, but I knew the fly was getting close. I said, just bump it. And he just moved the fly like an inch. I said, bump it again. I said, bump it again. And it got tight. And he set the hook, and this fish came flying out of the water like a Polaris missile. And he cleared the fly line, got him on the reel. He spun around, and his eyeballs were hanging on springs. Then the profanity started. It was awesome. And we took the fly out of this fish in about 15 minutes, and it was a whopper. This thing had to have been 150 to 160.
Wow.
But to watch my son catch that fish, in a spot where I was catching them 15 years ago was just awesome.
So talk about, you mentioned how quick you got a 150-pound tarpon in on fly. I think a lot of people, including myself, don't know how to properly fight a tarpon. I'm thinking 150-pound tarpon, it's taken me an hour, right? And I might be a little facetious there, but there are a lot of people that sit there and fight these things forever, and even with pretty heavy gear. Talk about some of the mistakes that are made on fighting tarpon and things that you've learned, from other guides and from tournaments, and and just trial and error and lifting dumbbells and stuff that you've done with your fly rod. I've heard all kinds of crazy stories.
Nicky, here's one thing that we all have to remember. We're not fighting a 150-pound fish. We're fighting a fish. So sometimes that fish that might be 60 or 70 or 80 pounds has a different personality than a fish that might be 150. So just because it's big doesn't mean it's going to take an hour to catch them. What's really important is understanding how hard you can pull on a fish. And two, most people fight fish with their arms. So when they lift the rod, they're bending the elbow and putting a bend in the rod tip, right? The real correct way to fight fish is to have that rod relatively straight and your arms relatively straight, and you lift with your legs. So you pull back on a fish with your lower back and your legs. You lift it with your arms slightly bent and the rod's up against your belly. And you lift it back a little bit. And right once you start to get a medium bend in the rod, you lower your rod, collect that line as fast as you can. And I do not fight the fish off the reel with a drag. I hang on to my fly line. So when I hang on to my fly line, I'm a full 100% lockdown. And so I'll have my drag is set at maybe 5 pounds of resistance.
Yeah.
I don't want a big fish falling against a heavy drag setting of, say, maybe a 10 or a 12-pound drag setting. But most of the tournaments are all 16-pound tournaments, and one tournament is a 12-pound test tournament. So what I did when I was fishing tournaments and when I first got started, I thought, I need to understand what does pulling mean? What does pull hard mean? When somebody says pull harder, what does that mean? Most people think when they say pull harder, they just lift the rod higher, put a bigger bend in the rod. They're pulling harder. But all they're doing is just bending the tip of the rod. Pulling harder means putting more pressure on the fish. So if I'm fishing 16-pound test tippet, ideally I want to be able to pull at least around 12 pounds pretty consistently. And if I pull 12 pounds of resistance, I'm going to catch that fish quickly. But two, if I'm fishing 16-pound test tippet, and most tippet breaks in the IGFA legal world record stuff, you're allowed 10% above that tippet strength, whatever it might be. So 16 pounds is going to break 10% above 16, so it's going to be 17 or so.
Yep.
So if I pull in 12 pounds of resistance on a fish, I've got a gap of 5 pounds of gray where I can make a mistake and still survive. They won't break me off. But if I'm pulling 15 or 16, that's too close to breaking them off. You see what I'm saying? You can't survive a bad head shake or something. But if you tell them 90% of people, you grab the end of their fly line, you tell them to stand back, you put a scale on it and say, okay, pull 12 pounds. Or pull as hard as you can. They stand back and they'll pull as hard as they can. I'll bet you almost anything, they don't even get over 10 pounds of resistance.
Interesting.
And it's kind of interesting, too, in that a lot of people and guides will tie maybe straight 30 or 40, or they fish 30-pound test to maybe a bite tippet off the fly, or they'll fish straight 40 to the fly. Guides that do that are really doing a disservice to their anglers. They're not teaching them how to become anglers. And if you tie a 16-pound or 20-pound test tippet tied to a fly, and you hook it on a fence, and you tie 50-pound test to a fly and hook it on a fence, and you stand back and you tell that person to pull as hard as they can. They're not going to, and you with a bent rod, slightly bent rod, or if you put a scale on both those flies, they're not going to pull any different. You cannot pull 20 pounds of resistance as an angler.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
So
interesting.
20 or 16 is the same as fishing with 40 or 50. But all that does, it allows that angler to be able to get away with making mistakes. And if you can get away with making mistakes as an angler, you don't become a better angler. That's like telling somebody, let's go play golf, and you're going to take a mulligan on every time they tee off.
That's a great analogy.
The fairway and give them a perfect lie. They're never, like Sandy Moret says, hell, if you don't play by the rules, we can all shoot par in golf. Well, if you don't play by the rules in fishing, you're never going to become a good angler.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. So what else did you learn?
Excuse me. So basically, you have to learn how to pull with your legs.
Yeah.
And so anybody out there, if you've got a drag setting, and if let's say some women don't have the hand strength to hang onto the fly line, that's why I like reels that have a one revolution on their drag setting to go from 0 to maximum. That way, if you want to set, so what I do, I got on one of my reels, so when I have from friends that fish, I have, I'll start increasing my drag with my fly line attached to a scale. And when it gets to 5 pounds of resistance, I put a mark on the drag knob and on the back of the reel face, right? That's a preset.
Got it.
Now I go to 8 pounds. So that mark on the top of the drag knob, now I put a mark on the back of the reel face. Okay, so I have 2 marks, 5 pounds and 8 pounds. And I got that one mark stays the same on the drag knob. Now I go to 10 pounds of resistance and put a mark on the back of the face. So I got 3 marks, 5, 8, and 10. Now, if you're an angler that likes to use drag, start at 5. And when you hook a big fish and he starts to run offshore, you can move that drag knob to 8 pounds. That will slow that fish down. Now, once you get up on the fish, I never start pulling until I get the boat close to the fish. Now I get the fat part of my fly line. Because if you're pulling and the fish, you still have backing and a full fly line, you're doing nothing but stretching that fly line. And at 10% of stretch, it's got to stretch 10 feet before you can get tight to the fish. So make sure as an angler to catch your fish quickly, get close to the fish. Have your guide move the boat close to the fish. Get to the fat part of the fly line. And then from there, you can hang onto the fly line and start pulling. And or increase your drag to say maybe 10 pounds if you like drag on your reel. But if you've got a reel that the drag knob has to spin a number of times to increase perch or resistance, that those marks are going to be really, it's almost impossible to be able to set your drag knob to a certain definitive drag setting, 5, 8, and 10.
Wow,
that's
brilliant.
So I work with Hardy. I help design the rods and the saltwater reels. And that's why I love to have a reel that's got one full revolution of drag from 0 to 100%. That way you know exactly where you are in your drag setting. Most people know it's a tight drag. Well, how tight is it?
Right. Have no idea.
So start thinking about numbers. So here's a great way to learn how to pull on fish. And you can see it on YouTube or whatever, but when I started fishing really a lot and wanted to start winning tournaments, I thought, so like my ex-wife, I used to have her hang onto a boga grip, and so I'd stand back and she'd tell me how much resistance I was pulling. So she didn't want to do that, and I didn't blame her. So I went to a marine store, and if you get a little pulley at a marine store, and you mount it to the underside of a workbench, you can go into your garage and put 2 screws with that pulley up onto the underside of a workbench. And if you want to learn how to pull a certain number, like for me with tarpon, initially I weighed a 12-pound bucket of dirt. And I would put the butt section of my leader through that pulley, and I would tie it to the handle of that bucket. Then when you stand back and you pull, that bucket comes off the floor. That's where you know you're at 12. So your hands learn how to pull. Your hands learn what 12 pounds of resistance is. You can see the rod. You can feel the rod. That way, once you do it a lot, so that way you can go out in the garage, you can drink beer, turn on some music, and you can practice pulling. And you learn how much and how hard to pull, and what part of your body you use. And then if you're a world record fisherman, I was trying the 6-pound tarpon record for a while. I'd fill that bucket with 4.5 or 5 pounds of dirt. Now I just use barbells. So if you want to fish 6-pound test or 2-pound test or whatever, it's imperative that you learn how much you're pulling in an actual number. Not like, oh, that's pretty tight. Oh, I got a lot on there. Well, what's a lot? Make it more of a number thing. And then that way you have a chance of catching your big fish really quickly. But more importantly, or just as important, learning what part of your body you pull. You see these people on TV, and they're fighting the fish with their right hand on top of the cork, right? So if you're right-handed, you want to fight that fish down the right side of your body. And you see these people with their right hand pushing across their body to the left side of their body, trying to put pressure on a fish. Well, if I shake hands with you and I want to pull you over, I'm going to pull you down the right side of my body. See, I'm not going to take my hand and pull you down the left side of my body. I've got no leverage. So fish fighting skills and footwork is very important. Like if I want to pull a fish down the left side of my body, my left hand has got to be on the top of the cork. That way I'm on my power side. So my left hand is pulling down that left side of my body. Anyway, it's kind of technical, but I think a lot of your audience members or people out there might understand what I'm talking about here. But it makes a huge difference between being an okay fighter of fish to being a great fighter of fish.
Yeah, and I feel like I saw a video of you doing that. So I'll search for that on YouTube and embed it in the show notes of kind of your fish fighting style. So what were some other kind of mistakes or big lessons that you learned after hiring all these guys and just spending that much time on the water? I assume casting is, regardless of fly fishing or not, I mean, casting is just critical, right?
Look, fishing and being a great saltwater fishing, it is primarily based on dexterity, casting dexterity. You've got to be able to get the fly to your target. And so, like a lot of times, the wind might be over your right shoulders, coming from right to left, and you're a right-handed caster. If you take that fly and you try to cast down the right side of your body, that wind's going to throw that fly right in your face. So it's imperative to understand how to make a backhand cast. And most people make a backhand cast with their hand coming across their chest, where you basically have got to turn your whole body to the left side. And that backhand cast has got to be made with the butt of the rod up against your forearm, and you can pull with leverage. The rod is now leveraged against your forearm, but the underside of your forearm, and you can pull across your body, instead of having your wrist facing forward like a trout guy.
Right, yep.
In a saltwater cast, you got to have leverage. And I don't care where the fish is, which direction the wind is blowing, which direction the boat is pointed. A great fisherman can get the fly to the fish right now. And it's all about dexterity in casting. And I can't stress that enough. Because most people, they say, you got to turn the boat. You got to turn the boat. I can't cast down that left side because the wind's off my right shoulder. Well, by the time, your guide moves or turns the boat, the fish is gone.
Yep.
And I'm talking about, being really as great of an angler as you can be. It's all about casting. And then you have to understand the fish too, where to put the fly, how to, there are five different elements of being a great fisherman. One is reading the water and reading the fish, reading the circumstances. Before you ever let go of the fly, you're assessing all the elements. 2, casting and presenting the fly. Where do you want to get that fly? 3, feeding the animal, whether it be a bonefish or a permit or a tarpon. You have to understand that animal and what that animal wants to see, how you make that fly move. And fly selection is a completely different thing. These are all just the elements of feeding and catching a fish. And then the 4th is hooking the fish. How do you hook a tarpon? There's only one way to do it correctly. And then 5, how do you fight the beast? How do you fight the animal? And without having all of those 5 things in your repertoire, you are only going to be an okay fisherman.
Well, I think that's a whole different podcast episode. We'll have to get on the water and do all 5 of them, it sounds like. we could do that for sure. But anyway, I mean, look, there's a complete full plethora of things on the water that are just so cool, and it's such a big life, and that's what I think
really got me. I mean, sure, I'm known as a tarpon guy, but I fish the bonefish in permit tournaments, and just the relationship you have with that guide and spending a day on the water and going finding a bunch of different animals and being able to catch them. I mean, we're just lucky. Anybody who's done this in their life and has a chance to do it a lot, they're blessed.
Oh yeah. So, question: You've caught a lot of fish, and you've caught a lot of really big fish. Is it tough going back to places like Aspen and hitting the little trout streams for little, what we would consider like dinks versus a 100-pound tarpon, or what?
You know what? No, I've been here, so get this. So I was in Florida. They closed my golf course. They closed all the boat ramps, and I don't go tarpon fishing until May. Although when it gets good, you can run down and fish for them because I trailer my boat from Boca. But they closed everything, and I was like, oh, man, there's nothing to do here. So I came out to my house in Aspen. Ski areas are closed, so I'm just kind of hiking the ski areas, every other day. And then I go to the river every afternoon. And now we just I called a friend of mine that's got a fly store. I said, I need some material. I'm out of flies. So I'm down on the river every day fishing.
That's awesome.
And I'm trying to tweak the system right now. So, with indicators and bubbles and, strike indicators, and I'm tying fluorescent backing onto above knots and trying to tweak the system, if you will. And we're tying little 18 and 20 pheasant tails, some with bead heads, some not. And, my son and I are down there every day. It's awesome. It's just the bigness is not there, but the challenge is definitely there.
Yeah. It's the cool part about fishing. It's always like a never ending puzzle. You're always learning stuff and new species and new areas. And that's awesome, man.
Yeah. You know what? It's like if you hunt, you like to hunt. Regardless, you have a favorite. Like I like elk because they bugle and you can talk to them and pull them into 6 feet and kill them with a sharp stick. But that doesn't mean, other forms of hunting aren't cool. Like Nikki's getting ready to go turkey hunting in the this next week or so. But yeah, fishing is fishing and hunting is hunting. It's a part of the environment and these animals we're chasing that is so compelling to me. And the system that has been predetermined as to how to do it, everything can be redesigned and tweaked and made better. We're always trying to tweak stuff.
Yep, I love it.
It's I would say right now for me with the virus out there, I was telling somebody the other day, when I came to Aspen and I was hiking the ski areas and there's nobody around and I'm on the river, it's like I own the river. I was saying, I'm living the dream. And the other day we were in the kitchen and my kitchen table's got all this fly tying stuff spread out. We're tying tarpon flies and we're starting to tie little trout flies. And I was really quiet, and Nikki says, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You seem different today." I said, I'm just quiet. I said, the other day I said, I'm living the dream. I'm up hiking the ski areas, I'm fishing the rivers, nobody around me. I'm doing exactly what I want to do. And then I realized I'm not living the dream because the world is broken. We don't know how long this is going to take to get back to normal. Will we ever have normal will never be the same because we understand that this darkness, this abyss called a virus, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, but it's there and it has affected the entire world. Yep. Health-wise, the financial world is crashed. When are we going to be able to have commerce back up and moving, like we once had it, within a month ago? So in that regard, yeah, I'm fortunate. I'm healthy. I love my life. I love my family, but I've got a broken heart right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all do, man. Let's, that was good. That was a powerful statement. To end, I know, I started this whole thing off. We talked about the podcast. Where can everyone go listen and subscribe and review and give you a bunch of love? I know I've watched on YouTube, you guys on iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. That's all too technical for me. I just sit in front of a camera and ask questions. But, I think a lot of people watch it on YouTube. But it's Millhouse .podcast. That's the Instagram site. Nikki's got a bunch of photographs and videos up. You go to YouTube, it's Millhouse Podcast. And as you said, Joe, we've got Hall of Famers. I mean, the biggest names in the game right now. We've got 6 that we've interviewed, and no, we've interviewed 12, but 6 are up and available to be heard and seen.
Yep.
And I think you'll enjoy it. If you're a fisherman, these are guys you want to listen to and see. They're unbelievable.
Yeah, and even if you're my age in your 40s or 50s, and you want your kids to learn about the pioneers, the ones who did so much to get us to where we are today. They're the ones, including you, Andy, that put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to figure out what flies work best, what knots work best. I mean, figuring out all this stuff to make it easier for us to go out there and enjoy the water. And some really true pioneers and some really cool stories too. So definitely check that out. And we will certainly, once this whole virus thing is safer, we'll have to get out there in the Keys and do some on the water stuff. I know is super helpful. And as we started this podcast as well, if you have any guides that you can help support, do it. I feel for all of them. I've talked to quite a few who are our great friends, and they're getting canceled on left and right, and no one, for the most part, seems to be offering to help. And even if you can give 50% or do some kind of barter where you get some flies in return or something else, that would be huge and mean a lot to a lot of these guides who not only make fishing fun but are amazing teachers and just a great place to network with as well. I know we have a bunch of them in our Insider Club, and we appreciate you big time. You're a huge help to the entire fishing community. And you too, Andy, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time, you and Nikki, to interview all these pioneers. As you said, the stories will be lost at some point if no one documents them. So I think this is real special and something that can be listened to and watched for many years to come. So I appreciate it, brother.
Well, Joe, thanks for allowing me to come onto your show. It's you got a huge audience, and you're very well respected and known, and I just feel honored that you asked me to be here today. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to doing something again with you in the future.
Yes, sir, and hope you get down to the Keys here first of May. You're able to get in, and if not, let me know. We got some back ways to get in,
All right. Listen, thanks again, Joe. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thank you.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was past that.